Imagine being trapped upside down, 400 feet beneath the earth, your chest crushed so tight you can barely breathe, every attempt to save you only pushing you deeper into the stone. This is the true story of John Edward Jones, a young husband and father who entered Nutty Putty Cave one November evening in 2009, and never came back out. Beneath the western hills of Utah Lake lies a hidden world of stone and silence, a labyrinth carved over ages by the patient hand of water. It is not a place of grandeur with glittering stalactites or vast caverns echoing with beauty, but a place of tight passages, cruel squeezes, and walls that seem to breathe against the skin. The locals called it Nutty Putty Cave, for the strange clay-like texture that lined its walls, a place where those who craved challenge would crawl on their bellies through cracks no wider than their shoulders, trusting in their bodies, trusting in their will, daring themselves to conquer the earth itself. On the eve of Thanksgiving in 2009, a young man named John Edward Jones entered that cave. He was 26 years old, a medical student, a husband, a father, a man whose life was full of promise and light. He had grown up in Utah in a family that loved the outdoors, that taught him the joy of exploration, the quiet thrill of venturing where few dared to go. He was strong, broad-shouldered, 6 feet tall, and more than 200 pounds, with steady hands and a warm smile. He loved his wife Emily deeply, and together they had a 1-year-old daughter. Their second child, a son, was still waiting to enter the world. John dreamed of practicing medicine near home, of raising his children among the valleys of Utah, of living a life built on faith, love, and service. That evening, as families gathered in warmth and laughter, John gathered with his brother Josh and several friends for a different kind of celebration. They chose adventure, choosing to descend into Nutty Putty before the holiday. The air outside was cold, the stars sharp against the November night, but inside the cave the temperature fell still and heavy. The entrance swallowed them, and soon they were crawling on hands and knees, their lamps cutting thin beams of light across walls slick with clay. The air smelled of earth and moisture. The passages pressed close, and breathing grew louder as they slid and crawled through spaces with names like the Scout Trap, the Big Slide, and the Birth Canal. The cave was not forgiving, but for John, it was exhilarating. He had done this before, explored tight places, and he trusted himself. At one point, he and Josh broke off from the group, deciding to try the notorious passage known as the Birth Canal. It was a squeeze many had attempted, narrow and unrelenting, but famous among cavers for its challenge. In the dim light, John mistook another opening for the passage. This one angled sharply downward, a crack in the stone barely 10 inches across. He believed it would open into a larger chamber if he could only push through. He slid headfirst, exhaling to shrink his chest, wriggling deeper. His ribs scraped, his shoulders pressed, his arms stretched forward into the dark. Inch by inch he pushed, believing the passage would widen. But it did not. It narrowed. His chest locked against stone, his arms pinned above his head. His body angled downward at nearly 70 degrees, his feet dangling in the open air behind him. He tried to back out, inhaled and exhaled, wriggled, strained. Nothing. The cave had closed around him like a vice. Josh, his voice echoed in the narrow shaft, calm but tight with fear. I'm stuck. His brother pulled at his legs, braced against stone, tried to free him. John exhaled, pressed against the walls, but his body slid only deeper, his chest compressed tighter, his breath reduced to shallow gulps. The rock was merciless, unyielding. After minutes of struggle, panic began to creep in. Upside down, 400 feet from the cave entrance, John felt the blood rushing to his head, his heart laboring harder to keep pace with the unnatural position. Josh scrambled back, calling for help. Rescue teams were summoned. Soon the mouth of the cave glowed with lights, the night alive with voices and the metallic clatter of gear. By midnight, dozens of rescuers had gathered, paramedics, engineers, volunteers, men and women trained to crawl into the earth and save those who had gone too far. Inside the cave, they wriggled through passages until they reached him. There in the suffocating black they found John, wedged upside down, his face flushed red, his voice strained but alive. "We're here," they told him. "We're going to get you out." They wrapped ropes around his legs, rigged pulleys to the rock, and began to pull. For a moment, hope surged, his body shifted, sliding upward. A cheer echoed faintly through the cave. But then came the crack of failure, the sickening snap of an anchor tearing free from the rock. The pulley system collapsed, and John slid back, wedged tighter than before. Still, he did not give up. He spoke with rescuers, sometimes joking weakly, often praying. He asked about his wife, about his children. One rescuer remembered him speaking of angels and demons, as though the veil between worlds had grown thin and he could see what others could not. For 27 hours the rescuers fought. They drilled at stone, breaking inches away to widen the shaft. They rigged new pulleys, straining with every muscle to pull him free. The air inside was hot and heavy, filled with sweat, clay dust, and desperation. Again and again they told him, "We're close." But the cave mocked their efforts. Every inch forward was lost, every plan ended in failure. John's body began to surrender. Blood pooled in his head, his heart strained under impossible pressure, his voice grew faint. He slipped in and out of consciousness, murmuring prayers, whispering love for his wife and children. In the small hours of November 25, silence fell. His breathing slowed, his pulse faded. When a medic touched his leg, the chill of death had already arrived. John Edward Jones was gone, the rescuers wept in the darkness. They had given everything, risked their lives, fought until there was nothing left to try. The earth had claimed him. The question lingered, could his body be recovered? They considered chiseling the stone, widening the shaft, pulling him out inch by inch. But the risk was too great. The cave was unstable, the shaft too narrow. To attempt recovery was to endanger more lives. With his family's grief-stricken consent, a final decision was made. John would remain where he had fallen. In the days that followed, workers sealed the entrance with concrete and explosives. Nutty Putty Cave was closed forever, transformed from a playground of the daring into a tomb. Above the sealed earth, a plaque was placed to mark the resting place of a man who had descended in search of adventure and never returned. Beneath the ground, John lay still, entombed in the stone that had refused to release. News spread quickly, shocking the world. People shuddered at the thought of the narrow shaft, the long hours, the slow decline of a young man full of life and love. His wife Emily faced the unthinkable burden of raising their children alone. Their son would grow up never knowing the father who had spoken his name in the dark. For the rescuers, the memory haunted them, the sight of his fading strength, the sound of his weakening voice, the closeness of salvation that slipped away. For the caving community, it was a reckoning. Nutty Putty was gone, sealed forever, and other caves across the country examined their safety with new caution. But in the quiet spaces of memory, John remained not in darkness but in light. His family remembered his laughter, his prayers, his tenderness. His rescuers remembered his courage, his faith, his calm even in fear. His story became more than a tragedy, it became a reminder. It reminds us that nature is vast and unforgiving, and must always be approached with humility and respect. It reminds us that strength is not enough, that wisdom often means knowing when not to go forward. It reminds us to cherish the time we have, to speak love freely and often, for tomorrow is never guaranteed. It reminds us of the power of sacrifice, for more than 100 rescuers risked their lives for one man, proving the worth of every single soul. And it reminds us of faith, for in his final hours John prayed, seeing light even in the dark, showing courage even when hope was fading. Today, Nutty Putty Cave lies sealed beneath the Utah earth, its passages filled with silence. But above, life continues. Children play, families gather, the sun rises each morning. And somewhere, in the memory of those who knew him and in the hearts of those who hear his story, John's light remains. His journey ended in stone, but the lessons he left behind continue to echo. Life is fragile, love is eternal, and the deepest darkness cannot extinguish the smallest flame of faith, and perhaps, beyond the walls of that narrow passage, beyond the suffocating grip of the earth, John found at last the wide and open chamber he had been searching for all along. Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment and subscribe our channel. Press bell icon to stay connected with us.